Have you ever wondered, why do I need to write a book? In this episode, we are going to dive deep in not just the reasons why, but why not write a book? How to create a ton of amazing content that other people not only enjoy, but that they can actually create business opportunities for you, have more impact, have more income, have more opportunity to really take your message out to the world. A book is one of the fastest ways to take your ideas and put them in a framework that other people can use. I have an amazing guest today, David Lloyd Strauss. He's my book coach. I love this guy. He helped me get out the story hook method. If you look right back there, that's the book that we worked together over the last 14 months to bring to pass. And today we're going to give you a very simple framework to allow you to not just start getting these ideas out of your head and onto paper, but to help you understand the reasons why that matters. And the reason why, if you don't do this, it will be a hidden tax on your progress and make it so it's really difficult for you to make the income and the impact and the influence that you want to make in this world. So I'm very happy to have David Strauss on today. Let's welcome him to the stage. David, how are you doing today?
Brigham, I'm so grateful to be here. Thank you for hosting me here. You know how much I love and appreciate you. So I'm really excited about this opportunity to pour into your audience and the people that you serve.
Absolutely. Well, I first want to have your overarching theme. Why do you tell everyone they need to write a book? Why write a book?
Well, I believe that a person's story is their most valuable asset, because when you write a book, what you're really doing is you're turning all the challenges you faced in life, all the difficulties, and you're turning it into a lesson for other people to make it through the same difficulties. So really your story, even though it might be difficult, or you might even be in the winter, the storm of it right now, even those things are difficult, they are an opportunity for you to learn and grow, and then to share that wisdom with others.
Beautiful. So that's the 30,000 foot overview. Guys, taking your story and putting it in a package wrapped up perfectly so other people can use it. It is a form of service that is so useful. It's something that changes the way that you look at your experiences and your hard-earned wisdom. Because when you do something with those experiences and you put it in the hands of somebody else, now they can go and have your legacy live forward. Let's talk about this, David. I know as we were working on this project together, one of the concepts that was so key to my success and so many other people's success is this idea of capturing stories before they kind of go away. I call this the 3 R's of story mining. It's how to extract raw, really amazing experiences and refine them to the point that they are usable. Talk to me about your process, and then I will bring in these 3 R's so other people will start to get an idea of why they're so important.
Yeah, so and I love your 3-step method. It's very, very effective. But what I do is I look for people and stories that transform lives. So what I ask people to do is really take an inventory of the core lessons in your life that really changed who you are and the way you move forward in life. So, for example, I was hit in the head by a falling rock back in 2008 and almost lost my life. Well, that was a tragedy at the time, but it became an opportunity. So one of the lessons I got from that experience is 100% personal responsibility. If you want to improve your life, you have to accept 100% responsibility for your life. So that would be an example of identifying a lesson from experiences and then using those core lessons. And you only need between 3 and 7, maybe 10, to really write a book. And so you just look back on your life and identify those core lessons, and they become the footprint for your book.
Beautiful. What are some of the ways that you've been able to identify those inflection points, those transition moments where you're like, well, this is who I was before, but now I have a leveled up version of myself because of that experience? How do you identify those?
So I call those look back moments. And so what I do is when I'm working with people on developing their story, I ask them, what are moments in your life where you can look back now and think, wow, that really changed my life? That's what you're looking for, or what are called look back moments. And we all know what those are. It can be, recovering from a major injury or an illness, or, any type of moment in time where your life actually changed because of a decision or because of just life events happening to you.
Yeah. I think The one that you brought up with getting hit by that rock, that's brought up really beautifully in your story, Dancing with Vampires. I love the concept here that you bring up. You want to avoid those energy vampires, but also notice when you're being an energy vampire. I thought that was an interesting takeaway for me, was sometimes we have these moments where we are the ones that are draining the life force of other people. And then at other times, because of our associations, they're draining it from us. So it's not just recognizing when you're around the wrong people, but when are you being the wrong person for other people?
Exactly.
That's a key
Well, it's
distinction.
interesting. I wrote that book as part of my recovery from my head injury. It was a 5-year journey.
Mhm.
And to answer your previous question again, I actually wrote my books as a way for me to self-reflect. So
Yeah.
I knew I wanted to write a book, but I also knew that I needed to heal some of my relationships in my life. I had too many toxic people. So sometimes your book is actually a problem that you solve for yourself. And then when you solve it for yourself, you realize that you can solve that problem for others.
Mm. That's beautiful. One of the things I think is absolutely essential is making sure that your book solves a problem that people will pay for. Because there are some problems that are so small that it doesn't matter and that doesn't need a book. But how do you identify those problems that people will pay for, that can actually generate income and make it so that your book can actually become a brand?
Yeah, so that for me, what I realized was we all have a story of from to.
Mhm.
So I came from a head injury to where I want to go. So really identifying is what is that journey? Every person in life goes through a journey, and we all have opponents in life. And sometimes when we learn how to navigate those opponents, we improve our lives. And so, really, what are the opponents in your life? It can be people, and it can also be events or situations.
Mhm.
And so, for me, I look for analogies like dancing with energy vampires, for example, dancing with
Mhm.
vampires. Like for me, I thought vampires is something that people can relate to. Sometimes it's more effective, like you did with story hook method. It's more effective to come up with an analogy as your concept that people can relate to instead of telling them the concept directly.
Mhm.
For example, if I had titled the book "Get Negative People Out of Your Life," that wouldn't have been as catchy.
Right.
Like story hook method, like you do. You need to have some type of hook that gets people to want to get into your story. And so that's what I do is I help people identify what their hook would be for their message.
Beautiful. One of the things that I think is really beautiful in the way that you work your magic when it comes to being a coach is you focus on the simplicity. And one of the ways that I conceptualize this is a lot of times if you have 5 or 6 hours, you can get out your story. Anybody can do that. But if you have to distill it and package it up in a very simple format, like in a book, because people don't want all of the frills, they want to know what's the valuable end. Like, what does this mean for me? Can you talk us through that process of going from the gross all the way down to the net results that will end up in a book?
Yeah, so the general idea and the concept that I work from is that the purpose of a book is to solve a problem, like you just
Mhm.
mentioned, right? But when you write a book, you aren't solving your problem, you're solving the reader's problem, right?
Mhm.
And so, what a lot of people do when they write books on their own without the benefit of a coach is they start telling their story. But what you're really doing is telling the reader's story. And what you're trying to do is get me toos. You want them to identify with your story.
Mhm.
So, your story becomes kind of a mirror or a reflection of what they're going through. And
Mhm.
so, part of my process really is finding those hooks that will help people kind of get drawn into your book, your story, your concept. And it really is conversational. There's a lot of questions that I ask people. What is the benefit of this book to the reader? How will the reader feel when they're done reading this book? What action will the reader take by reading this book? Those are examples. So it's more of a kind of a conversational approach to really identifying the benefit of the book for the reader. And that's what we're looking for is what benefit does the reader get by the story?
See, and this is the difference between having a book that will help launch your brand and having a book that will stay on Amazon or on the shelf that nobody ever reads. I think this is something that is huge. If you understand what value is, it comes down to, does it solve the problem or not? And is it useful? If it's something that's useful and someone will pay for, then you did a good job framing this and making it interesting for somebody else to read. If at the end of the book, they're like, well, that was kind of entertaining, but I didn't get anything from it, I'm not going to use it. Nobody was benefited. That's a bummer, right? That's really sad. That's pretty disappointing.
Yeah.
One of the things I would love to discuss now is this idea of the 3 R's of story mining. Now, when I came up with this concept, I've used this for quite a while, but formalizing this concept was, how do I take my huge ideas and compress them into something that is usable, something that other people can take and extract value from? The first R is to recover, or recovering. The second is refining. And the third one is releasing. You help me refine this process and make it super simple so other people can understand this. What's your take on the recovering, refining, and releasing, or 3 R's of story mining? What's your take on it, David?
So, there's a few different approaches to recovering. In my mind, when we were first working together, and I looked at that word, and then you can maybe also share your view of it. I thought, recovering for me really was drawing that story back into your mind, like reflecting on it and bringing it back into the present moment. So when you're recovering a story, you are drawing it into the moment and asking yourself, how can I use this story in the book? So you're recovering the story. Is that something that you would agree with? Or
Absolutely. It's not just thinking, oh, where did I heal from this? Because a lot of people have recovery as a thought of, oh, I was injured and now I'm better. Recovering is like, I have to go on a mission, almost like you're putting on a backpack. Like, I'm going to go and figure out where I can get these rocks or these different things to build this image of what that experience was like. Recovering is not just going there, it's bringing it to the present. So I think that was a great way to think about that.
yeah, absolutely. And it's really important. A lot of people, when they look back in their past, they associate a lot of pain with their past. It doesn't mean bad things didn't happen.
Right.
But really, recovering the story really also, in my world, it means turning it into something useful.
Yep.
Which really is your next word, refining.
For sure. Now with refining, I kind of think of an old time prospector getting that pan of gold, and he's got the pay dirt, he's done the digging, but now he has to go through, hey, how do I get this all the way distilled down to what the elements are that have to be there? And then as you're in that refining process, you're getting rid of a lot of stuff. It's basically trimming the fat until you only have what is essential. And when you boil that down, you started to refine it. You can give that now to a jeweler because you've got the gold, and you polish it and you put it together and you melt it down until the impurities are out. And that's a process. This part is the longest of all of them because it takes a little while to recover, but it takes the most to refine. Talk to us about what you've done to be able to refine and edit and really distill down and polish these ideas.
Yeah, so that for me, that's the most fun part of the process. So as you know, when we first start working on a book together, my method is just say everything that needs to be said, because you don't want to create writer's block. You just say everything that needs to be said. And then we work towards getting a complete working manuscript. And then we start refining. We start looking at the content more closely. Like what content has been overstated or understated? Where do we need to expand more on some ideas? Remember, when a person picks up a book and reads it, the job of the writer and the editor is to take that reader on a journey from to, right? So all the refining of the content really needs to make sure that the reader is having a positive experience on that journey. We don't want them to just start the book. We want them to finish it. Exactly. And in order for them to finish it, they have to continuously identify with the content. In order to do that, you have to continuously refine the message. And it's not complicated. It's like, would the reader relate to this? That's really all you're asking. Would this idea help the reader understand this concept? And we do that throughout the book. And it's really fun because you can add in comedy, you can add in more of your personality, examples, analogies. It's refining is a really fun part of the book. I love it.
Yeah, it's almost like you're taking these ideas and saying, oh, how can I make this better? Is there a way that I can make this simpler? Is there a way that I can make every single word pay for its own way?
Yeah.
I think that's the fun of this process. And if you don't like revision and you don't like rewriting, sorry, this is the majority of what you do. That's how writing is. I felt like I was done after a month or so because I had recovered all the stories and the concepts that I wanted to. I had almost, what I think it was 78,000 words, and David's like, we're not going to put that all into the book yet. Sorry. The refining process was, how do we condense this, simplify it? You can still use all the other content in different ways on social media posts or using those little anecdotes and podcasts and different things. But as far as what has to be there, that's where the refining process is really important.
Yeah.
And I loved how you said, would the
also,
oh yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry. Also, nowadays people want concise books. They don't want to be taken down a long trail. And the other thing that we did that was refining was the way you designed the book, which was adding all your custom divider lines and characters and everything. And, you know, that draws the reader in. It makes the book look interesting. So it's not just the words. I think designing a book is very important.
Yeah, that was something that I was really passionate about the last 4 or 5 months, is how do I make the book visually interesting as well as absolutely positively useful in every way. So wherever it is that they gather value, if they apply anything from the book, they'll be able to be better storytellers, higher level communicators, and create impact, influence, and income. I felt like we've delivered that at every stage. And one of the things I love about this idea of refining is when you are asking, how can the reader relate to this? And we put those little hooks in there consistently, it gives people reasons to keep reading. And I think that's part of this refining process. At the beginning, you're not going to have all of those put out. It's too overwhelming if you try and edit while you are putting all those concepts onto paper. But as soon as they're out of your head and onto paper, now you can say, well, how do we make this more meaningful? How do we get this story to be simpler so that when somebody reads it, they do something with the ideas and they get into implementation mode? And that is a very useful thing. Now, this last step, I think, is where most people have a complete block. And there are dozens and dozens of books. I want to give my grandpa as an example really quick. He was a phenomenal writer. He wrote probably tens of thousands of words on different stories all the time. And the way that he expressed a lot of his stories was through painting. It's beautiful. I wrote a book called The Imagination is a Place, all about his worlds that he created. The sad thing was, nobody else knew that he was an amazing writer other than his kids and his family. He never published anything. He got through the recovery and he even refined the stories and the worlds beautifully. But at some point, he never completed the project. It stayed in his computer. He may have even printed and formatted and made it look really gorgeous, but he never printed it and sold it. How many of us have books in us that we have thought about, we've even worked on, and maybe even gotten 95% done, but haven't gone that final percent to say, submit to the publisher? How do you help people know that it's okay to have something done that's not perfect? Because done is better than perfect. How do you help somebody actually get over that hump of, well, there might be some typos or there might be something that isn't perfect, and have them actually produce something?
You know, that's a really good question. I think it comes down to a person's commitments to the story. Mm-hmm. Like, how important is it for you to really get this book out there, right? And so the reason done is more important than perfect is because life is a work in progress. None of us are perfect.
Yeah.
And if you're always pursuing perfection, then you actually never get results. And it doesn't mean that we do not, you know, when we say that done is better than perfect, what we're saying is the book fulfilling its purpose? Like, there's always another story that you can add. There's always another edit that you can make. But there is in the writing journey, the question is, have you met the objective of the book? Right? Mm-hmm. And you get it done. Now, 6 months later, a year later, 2 years later, 5 years later, you might want to make a second edition of the book, which is what many people do. And I'm doing that with several of my books right now, a second edition. That's when you have more experience, you have more feedback from the readers, and you think, you know what, I want to do a second edition because I've learned a lot more and I want to expand on this idea. So done means that the job has fulfilled the purpose based on all the tools and awareness you have right now and the time that you have right now. And the other side of it is I have a sense of urgency. If your book is about transforming lives based on your personal story, I believe there's someone out there right now who's suffering with the same problems that you went through, and they're looking for a book that's going to help them make it through the dark side of their life, right? And so the longer you take trying to be perfect, the longer it's going to take for that person to find your book. And so for me, the urgency is really, getting your message out there to help people. If that's really what your intention is, then we make a perfect book, but we're not pursuing perfection, because then it would never get published. Our goal is to get it in people's hands to change lives.
And I want to add one other thing here, because most of the time when we think about perfection, it is about having no mistakes. In English, that's a very common way to perceive this. In Mandarin, wan is beautiful, wan is complete, and mei is beautiful. When you complete something, it's beautiful. And that's what perfection literally is in Mandarin, because it's complete. You've gone the full circle and you closed it. You closed that gap. That doesn't mean there's no flaws. Sometimes we have errors in our thinking, or an example doesn't quite match perfectly, but having the work complete and actually releasing it, saying, now go and serve the world, almost like you took a little bird and you're like, all right, go. Like I was reading the story of Noah and the ark earlier this year with my kids. I was like, can you imagine Noah just taking that little bird and saying, all right, dove, go bring me back something. Hopefully the waters are not completely everywhere and we can find out if we can land anywhere. And that bird finally does come back. If you never release the bird, you never know if the flood waters are going to reside or not.
Yeah. Well,
so yeah, go ahead.
Well, I think it's also, in some respects, it's biblical. We're not perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're just not. But I think, God gives us experiences, and it's up to us to use those experiences to benefit others. And that's why, what a book does is a book will last longer than our individual lives. So a book is a legacy.
Yeah.
And so if you can really distill your life experiences into a simple book that people can read and enjoy and make a difference in their lives, for me, that's a form of devotional service. I really believe that when you take the time to distill your life experiences into a book, that is a way of serving God. And for me, that's true. And it doesn't have to be a religious book, but the idea of service is there, where you're serving humanity by getting past the self-judgment of your story and actually turning it into a resource for other people to heal or improve or grow.
Yeah. And when you're serving other people, you are serving God.
Yeah.
I think that's a beautiful way to think about this.
Yeah.
So here's the challenge. I think a lot of people have ideas they've recovered. They have even refined them to a point. But when it comes to releasing those ideas, there's some roadblocks mentally to be like, oh, are people going to actually read this? Do they want this? Do I know all the things I need to be able to do it? That's one of the reasons you hire a coach, guys. There are some roadblocks. And as soon as you have that experience, you surround yourself with other authors that have done it. A lot of those mental hurdles start to go away. The work still has to be done, but you don't have to do it alone. And I think that's a key distinction. Releasing a book, I didn't do it alone. You don't have to either. Talk to people about why a mentor is so essential for you. And do you have mentors, David?
Oh, I have plenty of mentors. My main mentor is Sharon Lecter, who is part of the Rich Dad, Poor Dad brand. She's the brains that brought that brand to life. And she's written many books, and she's been mentoring me for 6 years. A mentor is a person that's had the experience that you're seeking to create in your own life, and they can guide you and show you the shortcuts and where the landmines are, so you don't go through all the problems. A mentor is a way of compressing time. You still have to learn and do things, but they can teach you. And I spent a big part of my life making the wrong decision at least 3 times to make sure it was the wrong thing to do. And then I discovered the power of mentors, and I realized you don't have to make mistakes to learn. You can actually follow guidance, which is what, which is what the Bible is great for. Bible is guidance. The Bible is the book of mentors, I love that. And so in the writing world, mentors really, the role of a mentor in the writing world, or, what I call a coach, a writing coach, is that they will help you identify the nooks and crannies in your story that would actually add more life to your story. You know the big picture of your story because you were there, but a writing coach or a mentor can really help you dig into those little places and find those nuggets that are really going to bring your story to life so that the reader really does want to finish the book.
Beautiful. I think that's a key distinction when we're looking at doing something all by ourselves versus doing something with trained eyes. A lot of times we have blind spots. And the thing is about a blind spot is you can't tell that you have a blind spot. That's partially why we call it that. So when you have a mentor, they can say, oh, that's a diversion. That's not helping. This is where we need to focus. And we'll flesh out this moment. Oh, this next part. Oh, that's a gap that doesn't need to be there. Okay. And they start to help you understand where are those scenes or pockets of value, the gold nuggets that make people want to finish the book, want to continually engage with you. Now, one of the things that I think is really important is not every single book has to be super long, right? I'm reading a book by one of my friends. I'll give a little shout out. C.K. Frederick. He's one of my friends from high school. He just had his brand new book come out. And he spent a long time putting that book out. That's a beefy book, right? Sometimes a book can be compact and short. This is one of David's books, and it is 61 pages. Now, the mental exertion to put out a page count like that, how long did this book take you to write? And tell me about the writing process of this. It's called What If Today Were the Day? Talk to us about that.
That was a fun book. So I was sitting down at my desk. I was living in Denver at the time, and I was looking at all my goals, and everything was in the future. And I thought, what if today were the day? Like, not next week, not next month, not next year. What if today were the day I started loving myself? What if today were the day I started forgiving myself? And I literally just went on this rant, and I wrote down all these different ideas of what if today were the day. And it actually didn't start out as a book. It started out as a journal entry. Mm-hmm. And sometimes the best books are journal entries or posts on Facebook or something where you had a great idea. And when I was done, I was like, oh my gosh. So that was a journal entry. So I wrote it technically in a day, but I refined it over a week or two. Wow. So it wasn't a big process. But when I was done, I was like, man, I bet this would be a really cool message for a lot of other people. So sometimes, and this is an important point, sometimes your book is already written, but it's on Facebook posts or it's on Instagram or someplace. So you might already have your content. You just need to recover it.
Yes. And that's one of the things that we want to give people a challenge for. Looking at a book like this, you said, how many words do you think this is? Like 1,000 words, maybe? Something like that?
Yeah, about 1,000 words.
It's like a really powerful, punching blog post, 1,000, maybe 2,000 words. That's something that I firmly believe within maybe even 4,000 words. That is a very punchy book, something that's less than 100 pages, very compact, and has one specific purpose that it serves, to deliver one concept. What if I'm going to give you, as far as the challenge of anyone that's listening to this or comes back and listens to it, what if you took the one core lesson, the one thing that you have been putting off as far as your book, and you said, in the next week, I'm going to not only write, but I'm going to publish my own work? What would have to happen, David? Help them understand what that concept would be like, to not just get those recovered, refine them, but to literally release a book like that within a week, something less than 100 pages, something that's less than 4,000 words, that solves a problem that's over $10,000 worth of value. What would that look like?
So it would look like a few different things, but for sure, I would say, what do friends say that you're really good at? Like, when your friends talk about you, do they say, oh my gosh, David is a great cook, or David is really good at listening, or something. So if you think about what your friends think about you, that might give you an idea of what would be a good marketable product in terms of a book. But it could also be something that you're very passionate about, that like when you're in a conversation with friends or family, or at a party or something, what is something that you love talking about, within your business or in life, that you could just easily write about? So the mistake a lot of people do is they overthink their content for their book, and they think, well, will anybody like what I write? Will anybody read it? Don't judge yourself and don't judge your work before you even get started, right? Yeah. The question really is what are you passionate about that you could easily put into words on paper, that you already put into words when you're talking with people? That would be the simplest way to go.
I love it. One of the other things I would add to this is, whenever you are thinking about what your legacy story is, what is the one story or the one thing that you come back to over and over again? Like, this is when this happened. This is my moment. This was the time when everything shifted for me. A lot of times when we're looking at a legacy story or something that is that inflection point or a turning point, we can think, what was the context here that made it so that that had to happen? And how am I totally different because of that? It's that to or from to idea that you brought up earlier. So in reality, one of the things I do in my masterclass, I help people go through that process and not just create a book, but create a experience for someone. Because I think relationships and experiences are the real crux of a great read. And I read a lot of books. I read about a book a week. And I love to be able to have an experience with the author, get to know them, also an experience with the story. How do you take someone from just getting a textbook level idea and understanding to saying, you know what, we're not going to do the textbook surface level stuff. We're going to actually dig deep and get to the meat of a story that transforms somebody?
So I think that's really, I have my online author interview that people go through, where it's a series of questions that they answer that help them refine, really recover the stories and refine it. Mm-hmm. So that, using your process, which is great. But really it comes down to what are like the top 3 transformational lessons from your life, the top 5 or the top 7. It's like, we all have plenty of life lessons, but what are the 3 lessons that you could really hang your hat on? For me, it's 100% personal responsibility. And to talk about what, to add to what you were just saying, the day that I was hit in the head by a falling rock while I was walking through the desert, I literally had my hand on my head. I was bleeding out. I could put my finger underneath my scalp. It was a crazy day, right? But there was one section of the desert where I realized that there was no one that was going to come and rescue me. I was either going to die or I was going to make it out on my own. And in that moment, without going into all the details, that was when I really discovered the importance of 100% personal responsibility. So I had a lot of blame from a lot of difficulties earlier in my life. I was a runaway at 15 years old. My mom died. Everyone's got their story of what happened to them, right? But that experience was the gift from God that I didn't know that I needed. And so what I drew from that experience was 100% personal responsibility. So maybe you got out of an unhealthy relationship, or you recovered from an illness, or something happened in your life. Well, what is that one lessons that you got? And that's what we're looking for. We're not looking for every major lesson in your life. We're looking for, again, like we mentioned earlier in the show, those look back moments, because those look back moments actually become chapters in your book.
Beautiful. One of the things I also wanted to bring up when we are talking about doing a punchy book like this is having a really core concept. It's not just a catchy title. It's actually saying, how do I help somebody conceptualize my book in less than a page, less than that, in literally a breath? I think you did a great job with this book on that idea. Second Mouse Gets the Cheese. I kind of already know what the book's about by the title, because it's a really compelling title. And it's a common phrase, but it's something that I'm like, oh, he's going to go into a lot more depth here. And you did a great job. So feeling trapped by mistakes, bad advice, or inexperience. That clarifies what you mean by this, but how do you help people distill the concept of a book? Because a core concept is something that you can develop keynotes on, you can build your brand off of. But if you don't have concepts that are compelling, people aren't even going to pick up your book. So talk to us about that.
I think, because I'm a creative person, I always think in terms of analogies. Mm-hmm. And so I'm always looking for analogies that represent concepts that I believe in or live by. And so whenever I'm listening to audiobooks or YouTube videos, I listen to a lot of personal development content. I constantly get inspired with new ideas like, oh my gosh, that would be a great idea. In fact, second mouse gets to the cheese I heard someone use that term in a podcast, and they weren't talking about a book or anything. They just kind of used it aloof, like, oh yeah, second mouse gets the cheese. And I thought, oh my gosh, that would be a great book about the importance of having mentors, which is what that book's about, right? It's like you can either be the mouse that gets caught in the trap, or you can get a mentor and get the cheese, right? And so I just, again, through conversational discussions about concepts, we drill down and look for analogies, real life analogies that people can relate to. It's like Jack Canfield's book, Chicken Soup for the Soul. Well, everyone knows what chicken soup is good for when you're sick. Well, this was chicken soup for the soul, right? And actually, Mark Victor Hansen is a part of that book. And I met him recently at a book launch in Arizona. And Mark Victor Hansen was just an incredible human being. He and Jack Canfield, they took a concept and they ran with it. They found an analogy that people can relate to, and they ran with it. And that's what conversational research does. We kind of drill down of what analogies could really tell your story.
I think this is perfect. Whenever we think about branding our material, one of the biggest things is making sure you name it. And you name it something that's catchy and it encapsulates what it is you do as easily and simply as possible. Because I was working through this process a lot with you. I was like, well, what do I call this? I started out calling it pen in hand method. And I was like, it's a little bit too difficult to understand. I still have that story in the book. It's a very compelling narrative, but it was a little too ethereal for people to really grasp onto what it was. And then I went on to calling it value-driven storytelling. And I was like, it's not really simple enough to conceptualize what I mean by that. And then when we finally landed on story hook method, I was like, that's exactly what I'm trying to do. I'm utilizing stories to hook attention and to gather compelling conversations and ideas and wrap it in a way that other people want to interact with it. And it makes it unforgettable. It makes it engaging. So I appreciate the distilling process and the refining process of that, because your first idea is usually not the one that will land in the book, but you have to have the first idea to get the second and the third until it gets to that point when you're like, oh, there it is. I found it. So
it's really fun, and anyone that's thinking about writing a book, just right now, starting this moment, just think of analogies in your life that reflect your idea. And if they're fun and catchy, it's better actually. Mm-hmm. People like to smile and laugh, and if your title can help let people know what the book is about right away, that's great.
Mm-hmm. I think that's where a core concept is essential. And one of the things that you taught me that I have been sharing all over because I thought it was so valuable was the importance of trademarking your concepts and ideas, where you have multiple things that have your brand on it. They have your logo. They have ways that they're like, oh, this isn't just one book. It's not a one-off thing. You have multiple things in a series. You want to talk about the importance of branding in that context for a moment?
Yeah, so a branding is really like relates to creating a logo. So when you think of Amazon, you see the word Amazon, and then there's a swoosh below it which represents A to Z, right?
Yeah.
And so what branding does is whenever someone sees that logo, they equate it with you or your concept or your mission. And so in the book world, and of course I can't give legal advice, but I can give conceptual advice, right? Is that it takes 2 books. So you have to publish 2 books for the trademark purposes of a logo if you're using your book to trademark, right? Mm-hmm. And for me, my first book was larger, but your second book for trademark purposes could be 61 pages. It could be
like this, right? A short little thing.
Yeah. But the whole idea, a trademark is really a way of recognizing you or a concept that you're associated with. So, Chicken Soup for the Soul, when people think of that book, they think of Jack Canfield. and Mark Victor Hansen,
Hmm.
right? So it's a way of, it's really identifying. And it's important, if you're building a brand, you do want to have a logo that's trademarked, that it's kind of like planting your flag, saying, hey, every time you see this logo, you're going to know what to expect. It's creating an expectation for the consumer.
One of the things I want to add on to this is when we are thinking about making our content not just a one-off, but something that you are being known by, the problem that you solve, if you can in one breath say, oh, here's the problem. Oh, you need to talk to this person about it. That's what a real brand is. And if people can't remember you because you're not top of mind for them, that's a problem. And that's what a book really does. A lot of times you look at things that are like a business card, you get it, you maybe put the number in your phone, and you toss it. What do you do with a book after you read it though? I don't remember last time I just threw away a book. You keep it and it lives on your shelf. Like all those up there are people that have been on my podcast. And they're kind of one of those things. I read the book and I was like, oh, when I go back to it, I'm going to reference this. And it's a way to connect deeper with somebody because now you have their story and some of their frameworks and ideas. So for you, when you're thinking about booking a brand, this is your own content, how you've been able to help lots of people. What is the one thing that you say most people fail with, like their biggest hiccup when it comes to producing their book?
Ooh, I would say, well, the objection that people usually come up with most often is, will anybody want to read this? So they have a lot of doubt and self-judgment around their concept. Who's going to read this? That's probably the most common. I don't know who's going to read my books. All I know is that I can help people solve problems. And if the book is properly titled and properly written, the book is going to just by nature attract the right readers. Now, it doesn't mean you can just put it out there and put your arms, and wait for people to buy it. You still have to promote it. But really, it's a matter, if something that you learned in life changed your life, then you need to assume that it'll change other people's lives. And if you can just trust that process, if you want to call it law of attraction, whatever you want to call it, people have different terms for all that stuff, right? The question is, are you willing to take the risk of being vulnerable to share your story without judgment? And by doing so, take the risk of helping other people to change their lives. Because the only risk you're really taking is the risk to change other people's lives.
Yeah.
And is it
that's such a beautiful thing. The only risk you're taking is, are you going to be willing to let your story impact somebody else or not?
Yeah, that's the only risk.
That's beautiful. I think couldn't have been said better. Thank you so much, David. I would love for you to share a little bit of your experience with me. I know we've talked I've known you for almost 2 years now. We met in Sharon Lecter's basement when she basically commanded me. She's like, you have a great story. You have amazing experiences. You need to get your book out there. And from that moment in Greg's basement to today, we've been in contact. We've been connecting with each other. And it was almost 2 years ago, in November, that I started writing on that book. And then we started working with each other like 14 months ago and formalizing that process. And the book finally came out 2 weeks ago. So that's been an amazing experience. Talk to us about not just my content, but why would you recommend the Leveling Up podcast and myself as a resource for people to improve their lives, build impact, influence, and income?
That's easy to answer. I think what impressed me most about you is how coachable you are. And I think that is really important when you're looking for someone that's going to mentor you or help you through a life process. Are they also coachable, or are they set in their ways? It's like, you presented a lot of content with me, 70,000 words. That would have been like a 325-page book, and when I said, well, we need to refine this some more, right? You didn't question it. Is it frustrating? Yeah, because you want to say everything that you want to say, but extremely coachable. And I think when you realize that the person that you're working with is coachable, that means they're always learning and growing. And want to be with people that are learning and growing. That means everyone in their community is learning and growing. And that's a really good situation to be in. I think you're also very creative and insightful and intuitive, and you're a phenomenal listener. And I think some of the best coaches in the world are the ones that listen the best. You know, you can have really great ideas to help people, but if you aren't a good listener and you aren't coachable yourself, well, how are you going to help other people? Because you can't relate to other people. You know, I mean, what I really learned about being coachable was when I wrote my first book, Footsteps After the Fall, which is kind of the story of that day the rock hit me on the head. And I hired an editor, and you know, I wrote the entire book, and I found him through Facebook, didn't even, just randomly, right? Just a search. And he only edits his own books. He said, "Oh, I don't edit other people's books. I just do my own." I said, "Well, can you just do me a favor and give me your opinion?" So I sent him the manuscripts, and he read the entire thing. He says, "I don't ever do this, but I absolutely love your story. I want to help you." And he said, "But here's the deal." He says, "You're not going to like a lot of my suggestions because you wrote a phenomenal story, but we need to turn it into the reader's story," which is what we talked about at the beginning of the podcast. And he said, "I'm only willing to work with you if you're coachable, if you're willing to swallow your pride and trust me that what I'm doing is the best thing for your book." And that's what you've been. You've been extremely coachable. You've been a great listener. And I know that you're going to continue to convey that to other people. Plus, I mean, you're great. You love life. I mean, it's like, who wouldn't want to hang out with you?
Thank you, David. I appreciate that. Now, one of the things that I love to inspire my audience with is how can they interface with you more? What is something you're either working on or a book that, like, hey, this is where I would say your next step is go check this out, with people that want to write a book and people that are super serious, not just curious. I mean, they're serious about recovering their story, refining it, and then releasing it, that last step. How do you want people to interface with you?
Well, I had this idea about halfway through the podcast, so I'll share it with you. Well, the first thing is certainly reach out to me through Instagram. And my Instagram is I am David Strauss. I don't know if you can type it in there or not, if there's a place to do that. Maybe
I'll put it in the content at the bottom of this
Okay, great. Yeah. So reach out to me on Instagram. I am David Strauss. But what I would rather do is just do a free book writing workshop with you, Brigham, and your audience. And so if anybody really wants to go to the next step of writing a book, we'll just do a free 1 or 2 hour workshop, and I'll just chime in and give you everything I know how to do. And I think that would be fun. It would be a Zoom, and it would be interactive, and we could talk about what it looks like and, you know, how to develop your concept, your story, all that stuff.
I love it. Here's where we can do that. I've got a school group called Story Hook Method. I'll make sure that we will do it on the live version there. So it's easy for people to interface with us. And it's something that will be free, because that's what David said. Hey, it's going to be free. We'll do a 1 or 2 hour Zoom, get questions and answers, and have you guys, if you are serious about doing this, reach out to David and I and say, hey, I want to do this. Put a comment on this and say, hey, I'm in. I want to write my book. I want to actually release this thing. We're going to do this for you, and it'll be an amazing experience. So you can go on. I'll make sure this is linked in the comments as well, but it'll be on School, SKOOL. You'll see this at the Story Hook Method, and that's going to be a wonderful opportunity. We'll do that sometime in March. I think that is something that definitely has to happen, because I'm going to be doing a masterclass all through March, and we'll make sure that this is a free version of what it is I'll be doing in more depth later. So thanks so much, David. I think that's really kind to share your experience, not just for a short time, but literally given just so much value. Guys, if you want to pick up more of his books, he's available all over on Amazon. I've read all 3 of these, but you've got how many books you've written?
I have 12 books of my own.
12 books of your own.
Yeah, and I've written over 40 books, including people that I've worked with. So I've done a lot.
You've done a lot. Absolutely. So the GOAT when it comes to writing books. So thank you so much for all you do, David. We are done with the Leveling Up podcast for today, but join us again next week. One of the things that you can always count on is that I'm going to do my best to make sure that you have an amazing experience, that you start conceptualizing ideas that you can put into implementation mode. So take that challenge, recover your ideas, refine them so that you can release them and get that book done, not just in your head. Get it on a paper and then create something that other people can benefit from. So thanks so much, guys. We'll see you again next week. God bless.
Great.